Brittany Nichole Shank was born on July 6, 1995. At the time of her disappearance in 2018, she was only 23 years old. Despite her young age, she had already lived through experiences that reflected both hardship and determination. Brittany was the mother of 4 children. None of them were in her direct custody, yet she continued to make efforts to remain a part of their lives. Those who knew her understood that being present for her children, even in limited ways, was important to her identity as a mother. Brittany's personal life was defined by turbulence, but also by attempts at renewal. In the months leading up to her disappearance, she was trying to rebuild. She was working towards sobriety and looking for stability in ways that would allow her to improve her future. Reports note that she was even seeking a second job, aiming to support herself more securely while leaving behind influences that threatened her progress. Her romantic history contributed to a complicated reputation. Brittany had been married more than once, and each marriage came with controversy. Some people doubted her decisions, and at one point she felt compelled to post her marriage license online to prove the legitimacy of her relationship. Brittany's identity was also tied to her shifting presence online. She often created new social media accounts, sometimes maintaining several at once. These frequent changes made her life appear unpredictable, yet they also reflected her constant efforts to redefine herself during a difficult journey. In the years before her disappearance, Brittany Shank's life was often marked by instability. Much of that instability came from her personal struggles and the relationships she formed. Those who knew her observed that she moved quickly from one relationship to another. Many of the men she dated were described as bad boys, individuals often associated with drugs, violence, or legal problems. Both of her known husbands faced arrests, one connected to bar-related violence, the other for matters involving drugs. These choices in partners contributed to the turbulence that surrounded her daily life. Her relationships with family and friends were also strained at times. Misunderstandings, disappointments, and conflicts created barriers that were not always easily repaired. Still, even amid these difficulties, Brittany's family expressed love and concern for her. They acknowledged her struggles, but also recognized her efforts to move in a better direction. Brittany herself was not content to remain trapped in a cycle of chaos. She sought to break free from damaging influences, particularly as she worked to remain sober. Searching for stability, she pursued opportunities for employment and attempted to carve out a path toward independence. These efforts showed that she was not defined solely by her past difficulties, but was actively trying to change. Complicating her story further was her presence on social media. At times, she maintained as many as 6 accounts, starting fresh whenever major life events occurred. These constant shifts mirrored the unpredictability of her life, making it harder for others to follow her journey. At the time of her disappearance, Brittany Shank's appearance was both distinctive and memorable. She stood at just 5 feet 1 inch tall and weighed approximately 110 pounds. Despite her small frame, she expressed herself through bold and unmistakable choices in style. Her hair was one of her most striking features. Some reports describe it as dyed red with shaved sides, while other accounts, particularly from the day she vanished, note that she had recently dyed it blue-black. Combined with her alternative fashion sense, this detail made her instantly recognizable. Brittany also wore multiple piercings that set her apart. These included piercings in her tongue, nose, lip, and eyebrow. She had gauged ears, further adding to her edgy and expressive look. Alongside these features, her tattoos provided additional identifying markers, each carrying personal meaning and permanence. The tattoos included the name Caden across the right side of her upper chest and a large tribal butterfly across her lower back. On her left wrist was the name Zach, while her right wrist bore the initials JCP in orange ink. She also carried a sugar skull design on her right thigh, as well as the name Owen Connor Spar running vertically down her right leg. An additional tattoo marked her hip. These details not only help preserve Brittany's memory, but also remain crucial identifiers for law enforcement and the public. November 30th, 2018, was the last day anyone saw Brittany Shank. Earlier that day, she was reported to be with a man in his early to mid-20s. He was described as between 5 feet 6 and 5 feet 8 inches tall, with short blonde hair and noticeable mutton chop sideburns. His identity has never been confirmed, and his connection to Brittany's disappearance remains uncertain. That evening, Brittany borrowed her boyfriend's car and began driving along Fawn River Road in Sturgis, Michigan. The weather conditions were difficult, as the area was covered in heavy fog that reduced visibility and made driving hazardous. Around 9:30 p.m., Brittany lost control of the vehicle. She veered off the road, and the car ended up in a ditch in what was later determined to be a single-car accident. After the crash, witnesses reported seeing Brittany walking from house to house in the area, barefoot and without a coat. Her feet appeared injured, possibly from broken glass or from walking on rough surfaces. She seemed confused, disoriented, and in need of help. Cell phone records later showed she attempted to call her grandmother and emergency services several times, but poor reception prevented the calls from connecting. At one home, a resident provided her with a green army jacket to keep her warm. However, when the man turned away to call for help, Brittany ran off suddenly. That was the last time she was seen. The confusion, the fog, and her abrupt disappearance marked the beginning of a case that has remained unresolved. The investigation into Brittany Shank's disappearance began immediately after she was last seen on November 30th, 2018. Law enforcement faced difficulties from the very start, as the circumstances of that night were chaotic and confusing. Witness accounts described her as barefoot, injured, and erratic, moving from house to house in the fog. While these details provided a general picture, they also left unanswered questions about her physical state and mental clarity in those final moments. Poor cell service in the area added to the challenges. Records confirmed that Brittany had tried to call both her grandmother and emergency services, but none of her attempts successfully connected. This detail complicated efforts to trace her movements with precision and left investigators dependent on inconsistent reports from residents. Another obstacle was Brittany's complicated personal life. Her shifting relationships and wide social circle made it difficult to determine who may have been connected to her disappearance. Authorities were also aware of the unidentified blonde man she had been seen with earlier that day. Despite releasing a description, investigators were unable to confirm his identity, leaving a potential lead unresolved. Search efforts were extensive. Ground crews, air patrols, and community volunteers combed the area, but no trace of Brittany was discovered. The fog that blanketed the night of her disappearance seemed to extend metaphorically over the investigation itself. With few solid leads, law enforcement faced the difficult task of piecing together a story filled with gaps, red herrings, and unanswered questions. For Brittany Shank's family, the days following her disappearance became an ongoing struggle for answers. From the beginning, they rejected the idea that Brittany had simply walked away. Her loved ones insisted that something serious had happened to her, and they committed themselves to keeping her story alive in the public eye. Her mother, Jessica Rolfe, expressed her pain and determination through the media. In interviews, she repeatedly emphasized her love for her daughter and her refusal to give up. She described Brittany as deeply missed by her family and vowed that she would continue searching for the truth no matter how long it took. These statements revealed both a mother's grief and her unrelenting hope. Brittany's father, Greg Wallace, also played a role in pressing for more serious attention to the case. Like other family members, he questioned the effectiveness of the early investigation. Many relatives believed that the case had stalled without sufficient effort and openly pushed for the Michigan State Police to take over. Their goal was to ensure that more resources and experience were devoted to uncovering what had happened. Throughout the years, the family's public stance remained consistent. They voiced frustration with the lack of progress while simultaneously calling for the investigation to be treated with greater seriousness. Some family members went further, urging that Brittany's disappearance be handled not just as a missing persons case, but as a potential homicide. Their persistence has kept Brittany's name from fading into silence. Years after Brittany Shank's disappearance, her case might have faded from public attention if not for renewed interest through independent media. One of the strongest voices came from the Hide and Seek podcast hosted by James Basinger. He devoted multiple episodes to Brittany's story, bringing the case back into focus for listeners in Michigan and beyond. Basinger argued that the community had allowed Brittany's disappearance to slip into obscurity. He described this as an out-of-sight, out-of-mind mentality, warning that the lack of consistent attention had harmed the investigation. By revisiting the details of the case step by step, his podcast sought to keep Brittany's story visible and to challenge the silence that often surrounds unresolved cases. In his coverage, Basinger noted that Brittany's case was filled with what he called red herrings. He emphasized that the unusual number of conflicting details and theories only deepened the mystery. His work encouraged listeners to question what might have been overlooked and to reconsider early assumptions about what happened that night. Through podcasts and independent reporting, Brittany's name reappeared in conversations that had once grown quiet. This renewed coverage reminded the public that Brittany was not simply a case number, but a missing young woman whose fate remained uncertain. Today, the disappearance of Brittany Shank remains unresolved, but efforts to uncover the truth continue. The St. Joseph County Sheriff's Office has maintained responsibility for the investigation, and in recent years, the case has received support from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI has assisted with technical resources, including enhancements of Brittany's emergency call audio and database name searches, in hopes of clarifying lingering details. In 2025, the election of Sheriff Chad Spence marked a shift in tone for the investigation. Spence publicly renewed his office's commitment to solving Brittany's case. For Brittany's family, this leadership change offered cautious optimism. They had long voiced concerns that earlier investigative efforts lacked progress, and they welcomed the possibility of a stronger push forward. Despite extensive searches on land, in the air, and across waterways, no physical trace of Brittany has been located. Authorities continue to treat the matter as a missing persons case, though some of Brittany's family members firmly believe it should be reclassified as a homicide. This disagreement reflects the frustration and heartache that accompany years without closure. The ongoing investigation underscores both the persistence of law enforcement and the enduring pain of Brittany's loved ones. With each passing year, the absence of definitive answers weighs heavily. Yet the case remains open, and the possibility of resolution still exists. Authorities continue to encourage anyone with information to come forward, reminding the community that even the smallest detail could make a difference.